Rain pelted my face as security gripped my elbows, marching me across the parking lot like a criminal. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see them all raising champagne flutes, laughing around her, Madison, with her perfect smile in Stanford MBA, colorful balloons bobbing against the ceiling tiles, while my personal items sat pathetically in a soggy cardboard box under my arm. I caught Derek's eye, my manager of 4 years, as he lifted his glass higher in a theatrical toast. His mouth formed words I could read even through the streaked glass in pouring rain. She'll modernize everything. 4 years, 1,460 days of missed sleep, skipped meals, and solving impossible infrastructure problems while they gradually eliminated my entire support team. 4 years of creating something revolutionary that would transform how enterprises manage their cloud operations forever. We're pursuing industry-standard methodologies. Derek had announced 40 minutes earlier, sliding an empty box across his glass desk. Someone with, shall we say, more conventional certifications. I didn't plead, didn't scream, just nodded mechanically, while something vital inside me crumpled like discarded code. 4 years of my life, my brilliance, my actual blood and sweat, dismissed with corporate pleasantries and passive voice constructions. The security guard, Marcus, who used to chat with me every morning about his daughter's coding boot camp, now avoided my eyes as he watched me toss my drenched box into the passenger seat of my 10-year-old sedan. Protocol, he mumbled almost apologetically. I sat in my car, watching the celebration continue through the rain-blurred windows. They'd been grooming Madison for months, the rising star with impressive credentials who questioned my methods during every architecture review. Wouldn't a standard Kubernetes deployment be more maintainable, she'd ask, never having faced the real-world chaos of an actual production system under catastrophic load. I turned the key, and my car sputtered to life. Industry-standard methodologies, conventional certifications. These were code for, we don't understand your genius, so we're replacing you with something more familiar. The highway stretched before me as my windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour. I'd poured everything into that infrastructure system, my creativity, my intuition, my very essence, and now someone else would claim it. Before I continue this story, I need to check something with you. If you're finding this tale of corporate betrayal interesting so far, show your support by hitting that like button right now. Drop a comment if you've ever felt undervalued at work, and make sure you're subscribed to catch the rest of this wild ride. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. My name is Cassandra, and until 40 minutes ago, I was the lead infrastructure architect for one of the most ambitious enterprise automation platforms ever created. Not the type you'd notice from your daily workflow. This was the invisible architecture that made sure critical systems never went down, that deployments happened seamlessly across 12 time zones, that a Fortune 100 company's entire digital operations could function like a living organism rather than a fragile house of cards. I didn't look the part of a brilliant engineer. At 34, with unruly dark hair, I rarely bothered to style, and a preference for hoodies over corporate fashion. I was easy to underestimate. My colleagues learned quickly that my mind functioned differently, seeing patterns where others saw chaos, sensing the rhythm of system behavior like others might hear music. The apartment was dark when I arrived home. No pets, no plants, no waiting partner, just the hollow echo of my wet shoes on hardwood floors. I'd given everything to that job, to that platform, to solving problems no one else could solve. My social life had withered like neglected houseplants. My dating apps gathered digital dust. My family had stopped expecting me at gatherings. It wasn't supposed to end this way. 8 months earlier, things had been different. My project, my beautiful, complex, revolutionary project, had received glowing preliminary reviews. Enterprise clients had marveled at the early demonstrations showing 40% reductions in deployment failures. This could save us millions annually, the CTO of Meridian Financial had said. Watching my system orchestrate a simulated disaster recovery in real time. How soon can we go live? That was when Derek started changing. Let me tell you about Derek. He'd been my manager since I joined Nexus Dynamics, a mid-sized tech consultancy that had somehow landed a massive contract with Meridian Financial. In the beginning, he seemed to appreciate my unconventional approach. Different is good, he'd say during our one-on-ones. Innovation requires thinking outside the box. But as my system grew more sophisticated, his enthusiasm curdled into something else. Concern, perhaps, or fear. Let me tell you more about Derek. He was the kind of manager who'd risen through the ranks by never making waves. Every decision optimized for safety. Every strategy borrowed from case studies. Every innovation filtered through the lens of what had worked elsewhere for someone else. He collected certifications the way others collected stamps, displayed them prominently on his office wall. AWS Solutions, Architect, Azure Administrator, Google Cloud Professional, ITIL Foundation, PMP, Scrum Master, 14 framed certificates, each one representing a standardized way of thinking that he mistook for expertise. When I first joined, he seemed intrigued by my different approach. I think he saw me as exotic, like a rare bird he could display at executive meetings. Our infrastructure team has developed some innovative approaches, he'd announce proudly, gesturing at my presentations. But he never understood what made them innovative. He just knew they impressed people. The problem started when others began asking questions he couldn't answer. How does the predictive engine work, clients would ask. Derek would look at me, wait for my explanation, then nod sagely, as if he'd known all along. But I could see the fear in his eyes, the fear of being exposed as a man who managed things he didn't understand, the fear that his 14 certificates couldn't explain what was happening in his own department. Your architecture is too complex, he started saying around month 18. No one else can understand it. That's because no one else designed adaptive systems that could anticipate failures before they happened. No one else had spent 3 years studying chaos engineering patterns. No one else had built custom monitoring that could predict cascade failures 47 minutes before traditional alerting systems even noticed anomalies. I tried to explain, tried to document, tried to train, but every training session I proposed was deprioritized. Every documentation sprint was canceled for more urgent client requests. Every knowledge transfer initiative was deemed too expensive. We'll get to it next quarter, Derek would say. Right now, we need to focus on billable work. Next quarter became next year. Next year became, we're still evaluating the best approach. The best approach never came. Meanwhile, they kept cutting my team. First it was budget constraints, then strategic realignment, then efficiency optimization. Whatever corporate euphemism they chose, the result was the same. I went from a team of 6 to a team of 3 to a team of 1, just me, maintaining an infrastructure that served 14 enterprise clients across 3 continents. The more I built, the more indispensable I became. The more indispensable I became, the more threatening I apparently seemed. Madison arrived 8 months ago, recruited directly from a prestigious consulting firm, Stanford MBA, AWS certifications, the kind of resume that made executives feel comfortable. Let me tell you about Madison. She was everything I wasn't, at least on paper: polished presentation skills, corporate wardrobe, the ability to speak in buzzwords that made executives nod approvingly. Digital transformation, cloud-native architecture, agile at scale, DevOps maturity model. She'd never actually built anything, never stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging a production outage, never felt the terror of watching a system you'd designed fail in real time, never experienced the triumph of solving a problem everyone said was impossible. But she had certifications. She had frameworks. She had the vocabulary of innovation without any of its substance. Derek introduced her at an all-hands meeting with barely contained excitement. Madison brings a fresh perspective. He announced, industry best practices, a proven methodology for enterprise transformation. I watched her smile graciously, accepting the applause like royalty greeting subjects. Something cold settled in my stomach. She questioned everything I did, not out of genuine curiosity, but with the performative skepticism of someone positioning herself as the reasonable alternative to my supposed chaos. Your monitoring approach seems overly complicated, she'd say in meetings, always when Derek was present. Wouldn't CloudWatch be sufficient? No, it wouldn't, because CloudWatch couldn't predict failures. It could only report them after they happened, but explaining the difference required understanding concepts she'd never encountered in her certification courses. She'd nod as if she understood. Then later, I'd hear her in Derek's office. I'm concerned about the technical debt we're accumulating. The architecture is becoming unmaintainable. We should consider a more standardized approach. Technical debt, the phrase consultants use when they don't understand something and want it replaced with something they do understand. Derek loved her, finally, someone who speaks our language. I overheard him telling the VP of engineering, someone who understands enterprise best practices. Enterprise best practices, the phrase that meant we're too scared to innovate. The termination meeting was almost a relief. Almost. Derek delivered the news with rehearsed sympathy. Budget realignment. Strategic refocusing. We're grateful for your contributions. He'd practiced this speech. I could tell by the way he avoided my eyes, the way his hands stayed perfectly still on his desk, the way he'd positioned the empty cardboard box before I even entered the room. He didn't mention that my contributions included saving Meridian Financial from a catastrophic outage 6 months earlier, an outage that my predictive system caught 43 minutes before it would have brought down their entire trading platform during market hours, an outage that would have cost them approximately $200 million in trading losses and regulatory penalties. He didn't mention that my architecture had reduced incident response time by 67%, or that client satisfaction scores had reached historic highs under my watch, or that the system I'd built had generated more positive feedback from enterprise clients than any other product in Nexus Dynamics history. He just slid the box across his desk and told me security would escort me out. Protocol, he said, as if that explained everything. Standard procedure for all departures. I knew that wasn't true. I'd seen other people leave. They got farewell lunches and LinkedIn recommendations. They got 2 weeks to transition their work. They got handshakes and well wishes. I got a cardboard box and a security escort in the rain, while my replacement got champagne and balloons. The rain had stopped by the time I finished my second glass of wine. My phone sat silent on the coffee table. No messages from colleagues. No expressions of surprise or solidarity. Just the soft glow of the screen, reflecting my face in the darkness. I should have been angry. Part of me was. But mostly, I felt a strange anticipation, like watching a slow-motion disaster from a safe distance, because I knew something they didn't. My system wasn't just complex, it was adaptive. It learned, it evolved, and it was designed to respond to specific operational patterns. My operational patterns. The documentation existed, technically. Thousands of pages of architecture diagrams, run books, and procedures. But documentation without context was like sheet music, without knowing how to read notes. The real knowledge lived in my head, in 4 years of accumulated intuition about how the system breathed and moved and responded. Madison would discover this. Soon, the call came 3 days later. I was at a coffee shop, updating my resume between sips of overpriced espresso, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Miss Cassandra. A woman's voice, professional but strained. This is Eleanor Chen, Chief Technology Officer at Meridian Financial. We need to talk. I let the silence stretch for a moment, savoring it. I'm afraid I'm no longer employed by Nexus Dynamics, I replied. You'll need to contact them for support issues. That's exactly why I'm calling you directly. Her voice tightened. We're experiencing critical system failures, multiple cascading issues across our production environment. Your former employer seems unable to resolve them. I see, I said, keeping my voice neutral. That sounds concerning, Miss Cassandra. Our trading platform has been degraded for 18 hours. We're losing money every minute. The regulatory implications alone could be catastrophic. I took a slow sip of espresso. Have you tried CloudWatch? The silence on the other end was eloquent. Miss Cassandra, I need you to understand the severity of this situation. We're prepared to engage you directly as an independent consultant. Name your rate, my rate. I'd thought about this moment during those dark hours after my termination, fantasized about it, even. But the number that came out of my mouth surprised even me. $15,000 per day, plus full indemnification, plus a written acknowledgement that Nexus Dynamics failed to provide adequate support. Done, Eleanor said without hesitation. How soon can you start? I looked at my half-finished resume, the job postings bookmarked on my laptop, the careful plans I'd made for my next conventional career move. Then I closed the laptop. I can be there in 2 hours. The Meridian Financial headquarters looked different from this side. Not as a vendor, escorted through back entrances and confined to windowless server rooms, but as an invited guest, walking through the marble lobby toward the executive elevator. Eleanor Chen met me personally on the 47th floor. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, which tracked with the 18 hours of system degradation she'd mentioned. Thank you for coming, she said, gripping my hand with desperate intensity. Let me show you what we're dealing with. The war room was chaos. Nexus Dynamics engineers huddled around monitors, arguing in hushed voices. Madison stood at a whiteboard, drawing diagrams that bore no resemblance to the actual system architecture. Empty coffee cups littered every surface. The air smelled of stress sweat and stale pizza, and in the corner, looking like he'd swallowed something bitter, sat Derek. His 14 certificates seemed very far away in this moment. Our eyes met across the room. His face cycled through surprise, anger, and finally settled on something that looked almost like fear. What is she doing here? He demanded, rising from his chair. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I invited her, Eleanor replied coolly. Since your team has been unable to resolve the issue for nearly 20 hours, I exercised our contractual right to engage independent expertise. This is highly irregular, Derek sputtered. She's a former employee. There could be conflicts of interest. Legal implications. We should consult with our attorneys before proceeding. The conflict of interest, Eleanor interrupted, is that we're hemorrhaging money while your certified expert draws meaningless diagrams on a whiteboard. Every minute of downtime costs us approximately $47,000. We've been down for 20 hours. Would you like me to do the math? Everyone turned to look at Madison, whose face flushed crimson. I've been following standard incident response procedures, she protested weakly. The system isn't responding to conventional troubleshooting. The documentation is incomplete. The architecture is undocumented. That's because it's not a conventional system, I said, speaking for the first time, and the documentation exists. You just didn't know where to look or how to interpret it. I walked to the nearest terminal, ignoring the hostile stares from the Nexus team. The monitoring dashboards showed exactly what I expected. Cascading failures triggered by incorrect configuration changes. Alert suppression rules that Madison had apparently modified without understanding their purpose. And at the center of it all, my adaptive orchestration system, confused and degraded by inputs it had never been designed to process. It was like watching someone try to play chess by moving pieces randomly. The board was the same, the pieces were the same, but the logic was completely absent. What happened here? I said slowly, studying the logs. Is that someone tried to normalize the monitoring thresholds without understanding why they were set dynamically. Madison stepped forward defensively. The alert volumes were excessive. I optimized them using industry best practices. You lobotomized the predictive engine. I replied, this system doesn't just monitor, it anticipates. It learns from patterns. When you flatten the thresholds, you essentially blinded it. That's ridiculous. Derek interjected. Monitoring systems don't learn. They report metrics. Standard monitoring systems don't learn. I agreed. This one does. That's why it caught the cascade failure 6 months ago before it happened. That's why your incident rate dropped by 67%. That's why Meridian renewed their contract for 3 years. Eleanor's expression sharpened. You're saying your system predicted failures before they occurred. I'm saying my system was designed to predict, prevent, and adapt, but only if operated by someone who understands how it thinks. She turned to Derek. Did you know about this capability? We had documentation, he said weakly. The architecture was supposed to be transferable. I actually laughed. Documentation without context is useless. I offered to conduct knowledge transfer sessions. Those requests were denied 17 times. I have the emails. The room went very quiet. Eleanor Chen stared at Derek for a long moment. Then, she pulled out her phone and made a call. Legal. Yes, it's Eleanor. I need you to review our contract with Nexus Dynamics. Specifically, the clauses regarding adequate support and knowledge transfer obligations. She paused, listening. Yes, I'll hold. The next 4 hours were a blur of intensive troubleshooting. Not troubleshooting, really. More like reconstruction, like teaching someone to read a language they'd never seen before. I walked the Meridian team through my system's logic, explained the adaptive algorithms, demonstrated how the predictive engine processed patterns. Here, I said, pointing at a configuration file Madison had modified. This threshold isn't arbitrary. It's calibrated to the specific failure patterns of your trading infrastructure. When you changed it to match AWS best practices, You essentially told the system to ignore the signals it was designed to detect. Madison watched from the corner, her confidence visibly crumbling with each revelation about capabilities she'd never understood. Her whiteboard diagrams, so neat and professional, looked increasingly absurd as I revealed the actual architecture beneath. Derek paced near the door, making increasingly frantic phone calls to what I assumed were Nexus Dynamics executives. His voice rose and fell in waves of defensive justification. We followed standard procedures. The documentation was inadequate. This is unprecedented. I tuned him out and focused on the work. The system had been designed to learn. That was its genius. But it had also been designed to trust its operator. When Madison fed it contradictory inputs, it tried to adapt. When she suppressed its alerts, it tried to find other ways to communicate. When she normalized its thresholds, it tried to work within the new constraints. Until it couldn't anymore. By midnight, the system was stabilized. The predictive engine was recalibrated. The monitoring thresholds restored. The alert rules corrected. By 2 a.m., it was fully operational. The first successful prediction came at 2:17, catching a potential memory leak that would have caused problems in about 3 hours. By dawn, Meridian Financial's trading platform was performing better than it had in months, better than it had ever performed under Nexus Dynamics management. Eleanor found me in the break room, nursing my fourth coffee of the night. The sun was just starting to illuminate the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I've spoken with our board," she said, sitting down across from me. "We're terminating our contract with Nexus Dynamics." I nodded, unsurprised. "We'd like to engage you directly, not as a consultant, as our Director of Infrastructure Innovation, full-time. You'd build and lead your own team." I set down my coffee cup. "I'm flattered, but I'm not sure I want to go back to corporate employment, not after what happened." "Understandable," Eleanor said. "Then let me offer an alternative. We'll fund your independent consultancy, Meridian as your anchor client, but you'd be free to take on others. Full autonomy over your methodology. No one telling you that your systems are too complex." She slid a paper across the table. The numbers made my head spin. "This is the retainer we're proposing. Annual, with quarterly performance bonuses." I stared at the figure. It was more than triple my salary at Nexus Dynamics. Why, I asked. "Because I've been in this industry for 30 years, Eleanor replied. "I've seen a lot of talented people get pushed out by mediocre managers who felt threatened. I've also seen companies collapse because they prioritized credentials over capability. I don't want Meridian to be one of those companies." She stood. "Take the weekend to think about it. But Cassandra, whatever you decide, know that your work matters. What you built matters. And anyone who couldn't see that was too blind to deserve you." The boardroom at Nexus Dynamics looked different from this angle. Not as an employee, anxious and eager to please, but as an independent consultant, invited to address the crisis that had been escalating since my departure. The emergency board meeting had been convened after Meridian Financial formally notified Nexus of material breach. 3 other enterprise clients had followed suit, citing concerns about support capabilities. The company's stock price had dropped 23% in a week. Industry publications were writing articles with headlines like, "Another tech consultancy learns the cost of cutting corners." I sat at the head of the table, a position I'd never occupied as an employee. The leather chair was comfortable. The view of the city was impressive. These were things I'd never noticed before. Always too busy, working to appreciate the executive floor. Derek sat at the far end, diminished somehow, his expensive suit hanging on him like borrowed clothes. His 14 certificates on the wall behind him seemed to mock him now. Madison wasn't present. I'd heard through former colleagues that she'd resigned 2 days after the Meridian incident, citing personal reasons. Her LinkedIn already showed a new position at a startup, where she'd probably inflict her best practices on another unsuspecting organization. Failing upward, as they say. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Harrison Clark, whom I'd never met during my employment, cleared his throat. "Miss Cassandra, we appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. Given the circumstances, it shows remarkable professionalism." I nodded, saying nothing. Let them fill the silence. "As you may know, we're facing significant challenges following recent client departures." He glanced at a tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be a lengthy document. "Our board has reviewed the incident reports and discovered some concerning patterns, such as the systematic denial of knowledge transfer requests you submitted." His eyes flicked to Derek. 17 requests over 18 months. Each one deprioritized or canceled, such as the elimination of your support team, despite your documented objections. I count 4 formal escalation memos warning of exactly this scenario, such as the replacement of a proven architect with someone who, according to our own incident analysis, fundamentally misunderstood the systems she was supposed to maintain. Derek shifted in his seat, his face cycling through various shades of red. "Those were resource allocation decisions," he said weakly. "Budget constraints. We were optimizing for efficiency. Budget constraints that have now cost us 4 major clients." The chairman replied, his voice cold. "Budget constraints that may cost us our company. Our liability exposure from the Meridian breach alone exceeds $40 million. He turned back to me. "Miss Cassandra, I understand you've established an independent consultancy. We'd like to engage your services to stabilize our remaining client relationships." I took a moment to appreciate the irony. The company that had escorted me out in the rain was now asking me to save them. "My consultancy is fully committed to existing clients," I replied, "including Meridian Financial, who hired me directly after your team failed to support them." The silence stretched uncomfortably. "However," I continued, "I might consider taking on additional work, under certain conditions. Name them. First, a formal acknowledgement of the circumstances surrounding my departure, in writing, distributed to all employees." The chairman nodded slowly. "What else?" "Second, I'll be bringing my own team. That includes Iris Chen, who I understand still works here. I'm offering her a position at triple her current salary." Iris had texted me secretly during the Meridian crisis, apologizing for not speaking up when I was terminated, offering to help however she could. She was one of the few people at Nexus who truly understood what I'd built. Third, Derek has no involvement in any project I work on. None whatsoever. No oversight, no approval authority, no access to my team or our work product. Every eye in the room turned to Derek, whose face had gone from red to a sickly pale. "That's unreasonable," he managed. "I'm the VP of Engineering. You can't just exclude me from projects in my own department. You're the reason we're in this situation." The chairman said quietly, "The board has reviewed your decision-making over the past 18 months. Your position will be discussed separately." "But I followed best practices." Derek protested. "I made data-driven decisions. The consultants recommended this approach." "The consultants," the chairman interrupted, "recommended cost optimization. You implemented it without understanding the risks. That's not data-driven decision-making. That's abdication of responsibility." He looked back at me. "What else?" "That's it. Those three conditions, plus my standard consulting rate, which I should mention has increased significantly since my departure. I slid a paper across the table. The daily rate was even higher than what I'd quoted Eleanor Chen. Let them see what they'd thrown away. Let them calculate the cost of that champagne toast. The chairman studied the figure. His expression didn't change, but I saw his eyebrows rise slightly. "We'll need to discuss this," he said finally. "But I believe we can reach an agreement." "Good." I stood, gathering my things. "Have your legal team send the contracts to my office. I'll review them this week." I paused at the door, turning back to look at Derek one more time. "For what it's worth," I said, "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because the clients deserve better. The engineers who still work here deserve better. And frankly, the work I built deserves better than what happened to it." I left without waiting for a response. Some things don't need answers. 3 months later, I stood in the lobby of my own office, not a corner of someone else's space, not a hot desk in a co-working facility, my own office, with my name on the door and my philosophy embedded in every decision. Cassandra Chen Infrastructure Innovation Consultancy. The sign read, below it, in smaller letters, Adaptive Solutions for Complex Systems. The space wasn't large. Just 3,000 square feet on the 14th floor of a building in the financial district. But every detail reflected what I'd learned about building sustainable teams. Open collaboration areas for the engineers who thought best in groups. Private focus rooms for those who needed silence. A kitchen stocked with real food, not just vending machine garbage. Natural light from windows that actually opened. No fluorescent buzz boxes draining everyone's energy. Iris had joined me first, bringing her deep knowledge of distributed systems and her infectious enthusiasm. She'd handed in her resignation at Nexus the same day I'd offered her the position. "I've been waiting for someone to do something right," she'd said. "Watching them destroy your work was the last straw." Then Marcus, a DevOps engineer I'd met at a conference 3 years ago. He'd been languishing at a company that valued process over results, meetings over action, certifications over capability. Then Jennifer, a chaos engineer who'd been laid off during a restructuring. Then David, a monitoring specialist whose previous employer had called his approach too unconventional. Then Sarah, a site reliability engineer who'd burned out carrying an entire infrastructure on her shoulders. 6 people who thought differently. 6 people who'd been underestimated elsewhere. 6 people who were now building something extraordinary together. We had rules, not the kind of rules that constrained creativity, the kind that protected it. No meetings without agendas, no decisions without documentation, no single points of failure, no knowledge hoarding, no credit stealing. Every system we built would be understood by at least 3 team members. Every architecture would be documented not just for compliance, but for comprehension. Every team member would be cross-trained, valued, and respected. The things I'd begged for at Nexus Dynamics, the things they'd denied me. Now I could build them from scratch. My phone buzzed with a message from Eleanor Chen. "Board approved the expansion project. Your team starts Monday. Congratulations." I smiled, looking around at the office I'd built from nothing. Iris was explaining something to Marcus at a whiteboard, both of them gesturing enthusiastically. Jennifer was deep in concentration at her workstation, headphones on, building something beautiful. David and Sarah were reviewing monitoring dashboards, debating the best approach to a tricky problem. This was what work was supposed to be. This was what I'd always wanted. And it had taken being escorted out in the rain, watching them toast my replacement through glass walls, to finally get here. The sweet moment wasn't the consulting contracts that now filled my calendar. It wasn't the industry recognition or the substantial fees. It wasn't even watching Nexus Dynamics struggle to survive after losing their major clients. The sweetest moment came on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 3 months after my termination. I was walking to a client meeting, enjoying the autumn sunshine that had finally replaced those weeks of rain. The weather seemed fitting somehow. Everything felt brighter now, clearer, more possible. I passed the Nexus Dynamics building without really planning to. My route didn't require it, but something drew me there. Maybe closure, maybe curiosity, maybe just the universe's sense of dramatic timing. Through the glass lobby, I could see moving boxes and people clearing out desks. The same lobby where I'd been escorted out in disgrace. The same glass walls through which I'd watched my replacement's party. The company had announced restructuring, significant workforce reduction, strategic refocusing, operational optimization, all the same euphemisms they'd used when they cut my team, now applied to the entire organization. Near the entrance, looking shell-shocked, stood Derek. A security guard stood beside him, holding a cardboard box. The same procedure, the same indignity, the same rainproof protocol. Though today was sunny, our eyes met through the glass. I saw the recognition flash across his face. The irony wasn't lost on him. 3 months ago, he'd watched me be marched out while celebrating my replacement. Now, he was the one holding the soggy box. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just nodded once and continued walking. My team of brilliant, unconventional thinkers was waiting for me at a client site. We had systems to build, problems to solve, patterns to discover, because true revenge isn't about destruction. It's about building something better from the ashes of what was taken from you. It's about proving that the people who dismissed you were wrong. It's about creating opportunities for others who've been underestimated. It's about changing the system that hurt you so it can't hurt anyone else the same way. Madison tried to connect with me on LinkedIn last month. Her message said she wanted to discuss potential consulting opportunities. I declined without responding. Derek sent an email asking if I might have any openings at my consultancy. His message mentioned his extensive certifications and his experience managing enterprise infrastructure teams. I didn't reply. Some bridges don't just burn. They should never have been built in the first place. And some people need to learn that certifications don't replace understanding. That management isn't the same as leadership. That complexity isn't chaos. That different isn't wrong. If you've made it to the end of this journey with me, you know what it feels like to be underestimated, dismissed, and then vindicated. The truth is, being fired from Nexus Dynamics was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me out of a situation where I was valued for what I produced, but not for who I was. It showed me that the people who couldn't understand my work weren't worthy of benefiting from it. It gave me the push I needed to build something of my own. I still think about that rainy afternoon sometimes, the celebration visible through the glass, the champagne toasts, the balloons bobbing against the ceiling, the cardboard box getting soaked in my arms while they cheered for Madison. But now when I think about it, I smile. Because Madison opened my files and discovered she couldn't understand them. Because the system I built was too sophisticated for conventional approaches. Because my complexity, my unconventional thinking, my adaptive architecture was exactly what made me invaluable. They just couldn't see it until it was gone. Last week, I got a message from Dennis, the security guard who'd escorted me to my car that rainy day. Miss Cassandra, he wrote, I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry about how everything happened. I heard about your new company. I'm proud of you. My daughter is applying to engineering programs now, and I tell her your story all the time about how sometimes the people who see things differently are the ones who change everything. I wrote back immediately. Tell your daughter to apply to our internship program. We need people who think differently. And Dennis, thank you for being kind when you didn't have to be. That's the thing about being underestimated. It hurts in the moment. It feels like the end of the world. But sometimes it's actually the beginning. Derek is still looking for work, according to LinkedIn. His 14 certificates don't seem to be opening as many doors as they used to. Turns out employers are starting to ask harder questions about why someone's previous company collapsed under their leadership. Madison's startup failed 6 months after she joined. Something about unsustainable growth and technical debt. I'm sure she blamed the documentation. Nexus Dynamics filed for bankruptcy protection last month. The building where they threw that champagne party is being converted into residential units. Someone else will live in those glass-walled conference rooms, never knowing what happened there. And me, I'm building systems that predict failures before they happen. I'm leading a team of brilliant, unconventional thinkers. I'm getting calls from Fortune 500 companies who've heard about our approach. I'm doing exactly what I was always meant to do, just without the people who couldn't see my value. Drop a comment sharing your own story of professional redemption. Like this video if you believe in the power of unconventional thinking, and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over corporate toxicity. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's changing the entire game. And sometimes the party they throw for your replacement is just the beginning of your real celebration. The replacement who couldn't understand what you built. The celebration that became a funeral for their own arrogance. The champagne that toasted their eventual downfall. Remember that. When they underestimate you, when they replace you with someone more conventional, when they escort you out while celebrating your replacement, remember that complexity is not chaos. That different is not wrong. That unconventional is not unprofessional. That the people who can't see your value don't deserve to benefit from it. Your time is coming. And when it does, you'll be ready. Because you've been building something extraordinary all along. They just couldn't see it. See you in the next video.